Welcome to Breaking Health Barriers with me, Dr. Jack Stockwell, here at K-Talk and also on the stream this Wednesday morning, the 9th day of April. Boy, a lot of stuff I've been saving up to go over with you today that I think you're going to find very, very interesting, especially what's happened specifically, what's happened the last 5 years with COVID. I want to spend a little bit of time with that. I know it's a little crazy. I'm not going to review the whole timeline. I'm not going to go through all of that. Just some of the key points that was predicted a few years ago as far as COVID was concerned by a lot of doctors who were warning us. And now a peer-reviewed paper just came out confirming the nightmare that this vaccine has been for so many people. A nightmare for those who are still alive, not so much a nightmare for those it killed. I want to talk about that. I'm going to talk about what the Chinese are doing in changing the human genome, what they're already doing with children, turning them into transhumans. Not humans anymore, something like a human, right from embryo stage right on through physical maturity. I think you're going to find that interesting. Also, a little bit more about how Kennedy's visit here to Utah and the issue with fluoride, several other states, what's going on with that, and the pushback that's taking place. And then several other things. I want to talk about how these sugar substitutes. I go to breakfast with Paul. You remember Paul used to be on my Friday, Philosophical Friday shows. He and I still go to breakfast, try to go at least once a week. Sometimes we don't. And I notice that on every table that we go to for breakfast, doesn't make any difference what restaurant, there's just piles of sugar substitutes sitting there. And some of the latest studies talking about how the continued use of these sugar substitutes can change your brain to where you want to eat more food. And then if we have time, I also want to get into the power of light and why there are spas in Europe that up in the Alps, in the high mountain areas where you have less atmosphere to protect you, yet these people go to these spas for 5, 6, 7 hours of sunbathing a day on top of everything else that's taking place in these spas. And something that you might want to keep in mind as we are moving into a more sunny time of the year, what you can do to protect your skin. And it comes back to, yes, you're right, it comes back to seed oils. And what else? A little bit about vitamin D, how you can hurt yourself with vitamin D toxicity. So I want to start off with the fact that it's been 5 years that we have been operating under this incredibly ridiculous program. I have a news release here, Sunday, March the 8th, 2020. What is this? This is 5 years and 1 month. This is one of the headlines. They got everybody scared to death. This is out of Italy. Italy announces lockdown as global coronavirus cases surpass 105,000. Now, what we know now, we have always known. At least if you've been listening to my radio show and listening to this stream for the few weeks that I've been on here, this whole mess, 5 years old now, almost to the month practically. And people, it's hard to remember what the world looked like before the Ides of March of 2020. Just, can you, 5 years. I mean, if you had had a baby born in March of 2020, that child would be getting ready to start school this fall. I mean, when I take care of a new baby in my clinic, and we take care of a lot of babies, newborns, just to make sure they got here with their spine in one piece, because quite often they don't. Their heads will be tipped or turned. They can only nurse in a certain position. They can't hold their head up straight. Just different things that indicate problems with the neck. And when I take care of a brand new baby from a lady who I took care of a brand new baby, as a brand new baby 20 years ago. It kind of puts you in, the stream of time goes flashing through your ears and around your eyes that you can hardly believe that much time's gone by. What were you doing March of 2020? Remember, this stuff started in December of 2019 with the Diamond Princess cruise boat, where there was like 3,500 people on the boat, and like 12 or 13 of them were found to have COVID. I'll bet there were 30 of them that had a cold. With all that aside, but all that paranoia that started back then. And then the Fauci, the Joseph Mengele of our generation, shows up and just scares everybody to death. And it's just, it's hard to find any other thing in history that has taken such a grip on every person on this planet, to the degree that their lives were so altered, in some cases permanently altered, as this scamdemic did. And there have been casualties. There have been something like 20 million deaths, I think, is the conservative number I've seen, and this has been attested to by many specialists and experts. At least 20 million deaths. And the casualties have come from all corners, and the people pointing this out, mostly the people pointing out originally what was going on, weren't people from the alternative health community. Although people from the alternative health community, like myself, watched in horror as these things were taking place. But a lot of the resistance came from well-established medical professionals. And we came together, we shared our struggles, we tried to make sense of this kind of stuff. I found myself laughing over some of this stuff at the very beginning, because I thought of the incredible madness, the incredible insanity that people could believe what they were being told about this. Now, from my perspective, it was very easy for me to see the holes in these arguments. I mean, I've been a healthcare professional now for 3.5 decades, and studying health since I was in my 20s, 50 years ago. And probably more than the average person on the street, but not any more than you, because listening to K-Talk for as long as you have, you know the value of individual research, and you just don't take somebody else's opinion because it seemed good or they seemed to know what they were talking about. But you got involved for the sake of yourself, if not your family, to research this stuff an awful lot more. And then as Trump is there towards the end of his presidency, and then you start getting this warp speed stuff, and you get Deborah Birx, and you get Tony Fauci, and then you start seeing what happens in New York, and you see what's happening with the nursing homes and the hope ship that Trump sends up the Hudson River to New York to help. And then you start getting all of these phone videos from smartphones of empty hospitals that were supposedly turning patients away because they had so many COVID victims. And then the mass psychosis stuff that started coming out, and the warnings that how you can lose all of your freedom in no time at all simply by buying into this nonsense. And at the end, the point I want to make here, the thing that's most crucial in remembering what took place over the last 5 years, is at the end of the day, it's what your soul inside you can truly perceive. If it can't recognize something like this scandemic and the psychic terror that came with it, what else is there to say? You saw it, you felt it, you knew it, even though members of your family in some cases, wouldn't let you come and visit them unless you went and got the vax. A lady that we're taking care of right now, when Trudy was talking to me about what her symptoms are, and my first question was, did she get the vax? Yeah. Why? Because she wanted to get on the plane to go watch a child's baptism, a granddaughter's baptism somewhere else in the country, and she couldn't get on the plane unless she got vaxxed. And now, of course, she's suffering all kinds of terrible symptoms. I want to repeat what I just said. If you can't recognize, and we recognize things not through our senses. Our senses is how we keep in touch with reality. That's all our senses are. It's just, they're antennas, the eyes, the ears, taste, touch, smell. They're antennas that connect us with what we perceive around us to be real. And as we change our thinking or we change our viewpoint, we'll change our perspective, and suddenly our reality changes right along with it. Reality is nothing more nor less than what you perceive it to be. Two people can see the same thing, experience what they believe to be reality, and but on testimony and cross-examining testimony in court, under oath, they saw two different things. But each one of them, it was real. Well, no, Dr. Jack, only one of them can be true. No, that's not how reality works. Reality is not the same from one person to the next, because reality is nothing more than the sum total of what you perceive. You have a deeper sense of being able to perceive what is ultimately true in your world, and that's your soul, the spirit, the intelligence, the thing that guides and drives your body right now. It can know much more than your senses can know. Remember, your senses are just antennas picking up information. You have to interpret that information. Your eyes don't see for you. Your retina picks up the electromagnetic spectrum that is reflected off of whatever's in front of you, creating electrical signals that go back to the visual cortex in the back of your head. Your visual cortex sorts through this kind of stuff to get some images. Those images then are sent to other parts of the brain, where the brain interprets what it's seeing. How does it interpret what it's seeing except on what it knows? And what it knows is the sum result of its cultural, spiritual, physical experiences of growing up and maturing. Now, I hope that makes sense, because it makes perfect sense to me that that's what reality is. People say, well, there's one ultimate truth, and that's all there is to it, and then you got to find that ultimate truth. You know, I bought into that once before. I don't anymore, because again, it's how you interpret what you see. And I think there's something different about the K-Talk audience as opposed to the general mill of the people out there whose only information is a constant flow of propaganda. Is this propaganda? Yeah, I probably got some propaganda that appears in here from time to time. But the important thing is that I have always tried to point you to your heart, to get you out of your head, into your heart. Get out of your head that interprets what the eyes are seeing, the ears are hearing. Get into your heart that knows everything. Your heart knows it all. Your heart knows the beginning from the end. And the essential pathway of truth isn't outside of you. Quit looking for it outside of you. It's inside of you. The kingdom is in you. The kingdom is within you, and the source of light and truth is within you, and you just need to tune into that. So when the next big hokey thing comes along, and it's coming, it's on its way. According to David Martin, I think there's another 43 viruses or something like that they've got mRNA stuff prepared for. And any one of them could be the next scamdemic. It's only your soul that can truly perceive, your spirit.
Laboratories in Salt Lake City is hiring. You are listening to K-Talk Media, KBJA AM 1640.
muted the radio station,
Results may vary. Not a solicitation for legal
and so I can continue to talk to you people who are on the stream.
payroll taxes.
That's a little loud.
And returns. The IRS will get
Somebody told me yesterday there was an echo, that there was an echo that was coming across the broadcast. I don't think it was on the stream. I think it was on the tower broadcast. So those of you who have my personal cell number here, if you are in fact, of course, I'm not broadcasting to the radio station right now. So and that should do it. I don't want to overplay this thing, because there are going to be new stories and new discourses and new sufferings that come along all the time. And here, 5 years, March of 2020 is when it really got bad. April of 2020 was when the fatal knife was stuck into the heart of America regarding COVID. When they went from infectious fatalities, infectious case studies to from infection to cases. In other words, the only way they could confirm COVID before the third week of April of 2020 was with a blood test. And they realized, third week of April, which we are approaching here in another week, is when the cold and flu season starts to disappear. It starts to disappear because things are greening, you're getting more oxygen, you're out in the sun more, so you're picking up more vitamin D, which is essential for the immune system, and the cold and flu stuff starts to disappear. Well, the same thing happened in March, April of 2020, as it does every year. And so the numbers of COVID cases started to fall off the radar screen. They're dropping precipitously. And if the average human being on this planet who actually studies this kind of stuff would probably could have realized, had they studied this stuff, that a big play was about to take place. And I think it's kind of like in the Paul Newman, Robert Redford movie, The Sting, the big play that, took place there. The big play was coming. And in order to have the big play, you had to have a lot of sick people. So instead of infectious fatality, they had to go to case fatality. And case fatality is simply, it looks like COVID. Let's call it COVID. But he died of a collision on his motorcycle with a car. Well, check his, he had a runny nose when he came in here. Looks like COVID. Make sure the cause of death is COVID. I'm not exaggerating. There's plenty of verified cases of this kind of stuff taking place 5 years ago. And with all the information that has come out on COVID so far, our state, our beloved state of Utah, is still pushing COVID vaccines. And not just COVID vaccines, but COVID vaccines for children. That was the demographic most likely to not get COVID. And now we know that COVID is a coronavirus, and most of the symptoms that people had with COVID was the same thing they would have if they had a bad cold or bronchitis or the flu, that they would get over within a week or two. I never got sick during that whole period of time. I had plenty of sick patients. Shedding was going on. I talked about shedding last week. I was asked to say something about it today. If I have time, I'll get to it. I was a victim of shedding. I know it because I know the person that did it. And they had just been vaxxed 2 or 3 days previous to their appointment. They were they had come down very sick following the vaccine. And I said, yeah, your immune system just got turned upside down, inside out. So you're picking up, the common stuff that you had in you all along that wasn't a problem. But your immune system is so weakened now because of that shot that what's the term? That I'll think of it here in a second. But anyway, it's, we're full of viruses. We're full of bacteria. Your immune system keeps it at bay. When your immune system weakens, they get a little bit of a stranglehold on you, and you go through a period of cleansing to get that stuff out of you. You may have a temperature, you may not. You may get sore throats or not, but eventually, within a couple of weeks, you pretty well get over it. The more stunted, the weaker your immune system is, the longer it's going to be around. It's that simple. So I came down with a couple of problems within a week, but after I had taken care of this person. And I remember when I had my hands, those of you who know what I do, you know that my hands are right there behind your ear at the top of your neck, very gently placed. I could feel it. I could feel as soon as I touched them, something happened to me. That quick. I felt the energy leave me. And for the next couple of weeks, I don't know if you call it sick or not, but I knew something terrible had happened. And ever since then, I've been fine. I've been fine because I do what's necessary to build my immune system. And I will continue to build my immune system. And now that we're coming into this time of the year that we are, I will be out in the sun a lot more. And I want to talk about that in light of the fact that you've got to, if you want to protect your skin, you have to get rid of the seed oils. Because the seed oils have a way of building up in the fat of the skin. The linoleic acid, the omega-6 stuff, that's been altered to some degree in the processing of these seed oils, soybean, canola, whatever else. And it sets your skin up to be irritated by the ultraviolet rays of the sun. And the best way, if you have any problems with the sun, but you'd like to get out in the sun, you got to give up seed oils for anywhere from 6 to 8 months. They have to completely get out of your diet so your body can clean that crap out of you. And then you can enjoy hours in the sun with very little protection. All right, I might be hitting that enough. I want to get to some other topics, not the least of which is this this new study, this peer-reviewed paper is confirming the vaccine nightmare that David Martin and several others 4 years ago, maybe as early as 4.5 years ago, were warning people of. But this bombshell peer-reviewed study just came out confirming what I've been warning for 5 years. And who am I? But there are people who have much greater name presence in this country than I do by a long shot. We have for this program now, we have about 800 subscribers on YouTube. And I greatly appreciate that. Most of them will see this broadcast this morning as a recorded broadcast. They're at work. There are many of you on the stream right now. I just checked the numbers. And I appreciate that. But the thing that I want to point out is that I have been warning about, I do not have a degree in virology. I don't have a degree in epidemiology. However, these have been principal topics of my study for years. And having attended Palmer College back in Davenport for my chiropractic degree, which is 10 semesters, mind you. It's not a weekend, study course. It's 10 semesters. The average undergraduate degree in college is 8 semesters. So after you have your 90 hours of pre-med before you can go to chiropractic college, then you got another 10 semesters after that. And a lot of it is on epidemiology, virology, bacteriology, and just the study of disease transmission, everything else. And so based on what I was taught then, which is pretty much the same, well, we had the same text, the same medical text you have in medical school. So I was taught pretty much the same thing that you get in med school with these subjects, but you get the alternate view to go with it that maybe something else might be going on in the body in the presence of sickness and disease, rather than just the presence of some bug that you need an antibiotic for. And that kind of appealed to me. Now, based on what I knew up to that point 5 years ago when this stuff started coming out, especially when the vaccines started to show up, the fast track, the warp speed vaccines. Vaccines, as you well know, take a good 10 years of study and to make sure that they're safe to the degree that they're made safe. And of course, not one of them is safe, but they try to make it safer than, you know, they can deal with. They can deal with a certain number of deaths and adverse reactions if those numbers are kept low enough. So they go through several years of development to get them to the point where it kills as few people as possible. Now, what I was warning of, you can't take a shot, a vax, in 6, 8, 9 months and force it on people when there aren't any safety studies out of what the company that developed the vaccine did themselves on a very limited basis to a very limited population. Remember, Pfizer's vaccine was tested on supermen and superwomen. Nobody was sick was allowed to use it. Pregnant women were not allowed to use it. Children were not allowed to use it. Only supermen and superwomen. And then there's only a few hundred of them who probably had good, stable, enduring, resilient immune system response. So, some of the conspiracy theorists that I was listening to back then were suggesting the fact, especially David Martin, that there was something else in the mix besides this plasmid, this mRNA bug. Of course, it wasn't. It was just a bacterial plasma, but they found out that it had the SV40 promoter, the thing that was in the early polios that they've now find contribute, they're accelerators for cancer. What was that doing in there? And a viral sequence that would interfere how your genes function, and a viral sequence that would even become a part of your DNA. So Dr. Mikolaj Rozek of Maragonomics reviewed this paper and said this: "We finally have it, the very first published scientific evidence showing that the mRNA vaccine, Pfizer vaccines, were contaminated with bacterial plasmid DNA." Now, I'm going to, after I get through talking on this subject, I'm going to talk about what's happening in China, where they are changing the DNA of infants to grow a different form of a human being. That's the more brave new world kind of approach to healthcare, as opposed to people who just got the vax. Well, I only got one. Well, which one did you get? Well, I think it was Pfizer. You didn't get the second one? You didn't get the boosters? Or no, I didn't get any of that. I only got one and I'm okay. Did you check the batch number of the vaccine that you got against the published list of adverse reactions matching up to that particular batch number? Well, I didn't know you could do that. See, it's people like this I worry about. People who just willy-nilly accept what some authority figure tells them is true, rather than investigating this stuff for themselves. So researchers tested the sealed vials, both monovalent and bivalent, the one or the two, and found the DNA fragments embedded within the nano particles, the lipid nanoparticles. And that's important because these nanoparticles, nano, of course, meaning incredibly small. I mean, these things are so small you need an electron microscope to see them, are designed to deliver genetic material directly into your cells. That's what they've learned. So DNA wasn't just contamination. They didn't find DNA in these vials as somebody somewhere along the line coughed or spit or choked and spread some DNA into the vial. They were put in there in a package to be delivered into your cells. It wasn't accidental. And a peer-reviewed paper just came out showing this. So he pointed out that the fragments included the SV40 enhancer, which he referred to as extremely dangerous. And so there are those out there on the fringe who are saying this is where all the turbo cancers are coming from. Because as the claim says, most of those suffering from turbo cancers had the vax. Are there those with turbo cancers that didn't get the vax? Yeah. Then my question is, were they living in proximity to somebody that did? Were they sexually intimate with somebody that did get the vax? Does it take sexual intimacy for the shedding? No, all you got to do is touch them. And we know that because in the original papers that came out from Pfizer, they talked about environmental contamination. It's just, what they meant was skin to skin. They didn't say that. That wasn't the verbiage. But what they meant was you could pick up the effects of the spike protein in your own body simply by being in contact with somebody else that had it. Has anybody been charged with anything yet about this? So in plain English, not that you need this because you've been listening to my program long enough, you're well schooled on this topic. But in plain English, fragments from the vaccine could potentially alter your DNA. What does that mean? By just quick review, and I don't want to sound like I'm beating a dead horse here because I hit this over and over again. If you could imagine the cell like a water balloon, you know, a nice big water balloon, the kind you would throw at somebody if you wanted to get them good and wet. And inside that water is something that's called, well, it's just the gush that's inside that cell. Yeah, that. Okay, I'm 74. Give me a break. That has all the little machinery that's inside that cell that does what that cell's supposed to do, a liver cell, kidney cell, brain cell, whatever. And inside that water balloon, imagine a golf ball. And that golf ball is the nucleus of the cell. And in that golf ball is the DNA of that cell. And that DNA stays there. It doesn't come out. DNA doesn't go in. It just stays there. And the DNA is telling the RNA and the messenger RNA that does leave the cell and goes out into the cellular matrix to tell the little machinery what to do. Gives them their instruction. And making proteins, cellular respiration, producing energy, whatever else that this cell does, that a lung cell would be doing or that a kidney cell would be doing. And the kidney cell does what it's supposed to do over and over and over and over again because it keeps getting the same instruction. That instruction is coming from the DNA. If you change the DNA inside the cellular the nucleus of the cell, the message will change. It's that simple. If the message is coming out, turn the machine on, and another message comes out and says, instead, turn the machine off, then that little machine inside the cell, inside that water balloon, will stop producing what it's supposed to produce. And it may be a very important protein that has to do with the lifespan of that cell. That's how serious this stuff is. And we were told from the very beginning, no, don't worry about it. It's not going to change the DNA. And now not only have we found that there are DNA changing processes present in the vax. It was embedded in these lipid nanoparticles. It was placed there. It's one thing to accidentally discover something. It's another thing to find out that it was put there in the first place on purpose. That's what they're finding. All right. Now, there was a guest on Joe Rogan's show here not too long ago, episode 2301. He's a biotech entrepreneur, Ben Lamb, L-A-M-M, Ben Lamb, painted this bone-chilling picture of where humanity can be headed. And it's gene editing. You see, inside the nucleus is the DNA. And the DNA is the blueprint to make genes. And genes are where the instructions come from for the cell to do what it's going to do. And so certain kinds of proteins, as I said, might be what this particular cell does. And it does that because of the genes. But what if you can edit the gene by changing the DNA image that comes in to create the next gene a little bit different than the previous gene? That's where you can have problems. And gene editing was at the heart of this conversation. And according to Lamb, his guest, China isn't just experimenting with gene editing. They've already created genetically modified children. And he pointed to a now infamous case back in 2018 when Chinese scientist He Jiankui announced that he had cloned human embryos and edited their genes using the CRISPR method to make them more resistant to HIV. Now just think about that for a minute. He cloned human embryos. How do you do that? Well, to have a human embryo, you have to have a sperm fertilizing an egg, and then that egg will create an embryo. And the embryo isn't what implants. The moral of about an 8-celled structure is what begins to implant in the uterine wall to become an embryo. But all this is done in vitro, in glass, in petri dishes. Well, I'm oversimplifying this. And they take an embryo, and how individualized is an embryo from everything else? It's completely individualized. You give that embryo the right growth situation, like implantation in the uterus, and it'll grow into a separate, distinct human being. So that means all the genetic material is already in that embryo. You don't have to wait for the 23 chromosomes from mom and the 23 from dad come together to create a fertilized egg and a new human being. Everything's already present in the embryo. So he is cloning these embryos. How do you do that? Well, the CRISPR, I forget what CRISPR stands for, but that's how they do gene editing. They can change the gene structure using this system. Imagine what artificial intelligence on the next level that they're developing right now could do with CRISPR and society that has certain members of society they don't like and find a way to get rid of them simply through gene editing. I don't know if you read Brave New World, Aldous Huxley's book. We had to read it. I think it was, well, I don't know whether it was 11th or 12th grade, but we had to read Brave New World. And I still remember the epsilon minus minus. They had the alphas, all of delta, down to the epsilons. And the epsilon minus minus, these were cloned human embryos that went through gene editing. That's talked about 100 years ago in Aldous Huxley's mind. And they were the elevator operators. That's all they were capable of being able to do. was to open and close elevator doors and move to one floor to another. That was the epsilon minus minuses. And I remember, we talked about this in classroom and what we'd ever do, and it's probably impossible that something like that could ever happen. Well, it's happening. And that's this thing I'm telling you about in China, where this cloned human embryo had their genes edited. Now, this cloned embryo, I don't know whether it went implanted in a uterus and was eventually born. I don't know. I would suspect that they have this technology to the point. I might lose all credibility here if I haven't already. They may have this to the point where you don't need mom anymore. You just need this life-giving substance that this cloned embryo that has been gene edited to make it more resistant to HIV. I hear something in the background here at K-Talk. I guess it was just station ID. And I mean, the news, this was 2000, this is 7 years ago. Has this thing been born? Is it out walking around on 2 feet? Because this news shocked the world and has led to widespread condemnation. Because if you can alter the genetic structure of a cloned embryo, where you just take, you take the DNA of the embryo as the cells are splitting, it's growing. There's a massive amount of cells now in an embryo, and you take the DNA and you inject it into another egg, and then it begins to replicate with the genetic instruction of the mother cell, and the DNA is exactly the same. And so now you have a cloned human embryo that did not require natural sperm egg fertilization. Just like they cloned the sheep, Dolly or whatever it was, and they've cloned other things. Now they're cloning humans. And in that cloned human, now think about the ethics of this. First, you have an embryo, sperm egg fertilization. You take the DNA out of those cells that are replicating now to become a human being, and you inject it into another cell that bypasses the sperm egg fertilization process, and now you have a developing embryo that's on its way to becoming a human being. I mean, of course, you could argue that it's a human being now. It's just in its embryonic stage. Does it have the same rights as the mother cell? Is it legally a human being, or is it something as a byproduct of laboratory experimentation and investigation, and it just stays in the laboratory? If this was done inside the United States, which would be illegal, that's why they're doing it in China. That doesn't mean it's not being done here. It just can't be done legally here. When they started doing the changes with the COVID, with SARS-CoV-2, they were already illegal there at North Carolina. That's why Fauci got it out of North Carolina over to China as fast as possible. If that was done here in the United States, would that cloned embryo be protected by the Bill of Rights? Is it legally a human being? So you get into an area here that is really getting widespread all around the planet condemnation. You can't do this kind of stuff, they're saying. Well, this Chinese scientist, after he announced what he had done, was later sentenced to prison for violating scientific ethics and unapproved procedures. Now, Ben Lamb, who's on the Joe Rogan show, didn't stop there. He said there's a growing debate over whether those same embryos were edited for enhanced intelligence. He said the science is inconclusive, but it's very real. If you can if you can alter the genes to make something HIV resistant, can you give it enhanced intelligence? Can you get rid of all the female embryos, just throw them in the trash and only let the male embryos? Or can you take a female embryo before it becomes a fetus and change it into a male if you wanted a big, strong, intelligence-enhanced, muscular-enhanced army? I mean, this is right out of Aldous Huxley. And H.G. Wells talked about this kind of stuff. This is, you know, I find this fascinating. I want to learn more about it, but it's as scary as it is fascinating. So Lamb pointed to Beijing Genomics Institute. It's a key player in this effort. He said that during the COVID-19 pandemic, BGI was offering free testing to countries around the world to harvest DNA at scale levels. He said, well, we're doing all this COVID testing for you for free. Just send us your data. Just send us your DNA. Now, your skin should be crawling about this point. 123andMe, or the local Ancestry.com, these kinds of things that do DNA indexing. Why would the government want your DNA? What can they discover looking at your DNA about you that you don't already know, or something that hasn't developed yet? What if they found you have a great likelihood for cancer in the next 10 years? And they offer you the golden parachute of all parachutes. I know what that sounds like. This is where my brain rushes to sometimes when I start hearing these kinds of things. And so BGI, the Beijing genetics thing, there was this, in 2021, Reuters investigation revealed that their company's prenatal tests taken by millions of women globally were using the data, the genetic data for the Chinese military without proper consent or oversight. In Reuters, July 7th, 2021. China's gene giant harvests data from millions of women. A prenatal test used worldwide sends gene data of pregnant women to the company that developed with China's military. The U.S. sees a security risk. You think? So Lamb alleges that the BGI had publicly stated its mission is to sequence as much of the global population as possible in search of genes that are tied to intelligence. Can you take the genes of one person and put it into the genetic structure of another person? Could you, in your genetic research, find somebody on their way to an IQ of 180? I don't know. This is just where my mind wanders. And take that same, and then replicate that genetic information and put it in 200,000 soldiers that will become soldiers. They might be born of women. They might be born in the laboratory. Superhuman, super intelligent. That's what he alleges the Chinese research is doing now. So we're coming up here towards the end of the hour. I want to get across a couple of more ideas. Lamb says that they are openly saying we are sequencing as much as we can of the world population looking for genes of intelligence. That's not a hidden thing. So if one country starts genetically modifying its population, the other countries aren't going to stand by and watch what's happening. I mean, it'll set off a global arms race, not with missiles or drones, but with DNA and CRISPR intelligence to see who can engineer the smartest, most advanced generation of humans on the planet. And once that race begins, there's no going back. I didn't intend on spending that much time with that. It just caught my fascination. Now we're coming up here to the top of the hour break. While K-Talk goes to station ID and news, I'll continue talking about this for those of you who are on the stream, because this is, and the news isn't picking this up. Reuters did a few years ago, and there's been a few mentions of it since then. But this is so horrifying in its potential that no one is touching this. But if China's doing this, who else is doing this? Are we doing it here in this country? Well, you damn well better we are. And so this is why some of the people are screaming about the Doge cutbacks with NIH. Because they say, well, we're on the verge of finding the cure for cancer. And if you cut back this money, everybody's going to die of cancer, or some other crazy argument like that. All right, I want to talk about several more things during the next hour. But I kind of get a kick out of this. During the break at K-Talk, I want to talk about what JFK is doing to shake up the CDC regarding fluoride in the water. So I've got that queued up so that I hear when that starts. And then I need to talk to you about a couple things in the clinic. And I am off to San Diego the beginning of next month. K-Talk, I'll be right back. I'm off to San Diego beginning of next month to talk about traumatic brain injury in the sense of severe concussions. And I have 2 patient cases that I'm using. I'll be talking to about 150 doctors. And the success that we're having in the clinic with concussions. So, I want to talk about here, Kennedy, in one of his, he was here this week in Utah. And in a major reversal of public health policy, Kennedy has directed the CDC to stop recommending fluoride in U.S. drinking water. Now, he didn't come out and say no more fluoride, because I think he has a sense of individual freedom. If a local jurisdiction wants fluoride in the water, I think as far as he's concerned, they can do that. Because he's not, this isn't some arbitrary command from the top that you don't have any recourse. You have to do exactly what we tell you to do, kind of stuff. But he does say, along with Lee Zeldin, who was here with him, the secretary or the administrator of the EPA, what a buildup of this fluoride in the water has to do with decreasing the IQ, especially of children, and leading to lower testosterone, thyroid dysfunction, bone disease, and then again, to repeat myself, reduced IQ in children. So during a presser here in Utah, the first state to officially ban fluoride, and that if the state wants to do it, that's the state's business. It's not the business of the federal government to tell all states to stop fluoridating their water. I like that freedom aspect left in there, as bad as I think fluoride in drinking water is. And I do everything I can to avoid drinking water. If I'm in a restaurant, I will get bottled water, and then most commercial bottled waters have fluoride, but some of them have far less than others. I used to have a list of all the major bottled water companies and the fluoride content, but I'm trying to remember the one that seemed to have the least. Some of the more popular ones have a lot of fluoride in it. How do you get rid of fluoride? Well, it depends on the form it's in. The water that's coming down the canyons here in Utah, that will end up in the aquifers and it ends up in the city water supply, has a different form of fluoride than the sodium fluoride that's added there at the very bottom of the canyon into the city water supply. And the sodium fluoride is a byproduct of aluminum processing, aluminum refining. And there are forms of fluoride that Mother Nature made that will get in the body and out through the urine. And there's the kinds of fluoride salts that we make, sodium fluoride, that has a tendency to hang around. And that's where the problem comes in. So standing with the EPA Administrator Zeldin, Kennedy said this: "It makes no sense to have this in our water supply. And I'm very, very proud of this state for being the first state to ban it. I hope many more will come." So for years, the CDC has called water fluoridation one of the top public health achievements of the 20th century. But Kennedy says it's time to review that claim. He pointed to new data linking high fluoride intake to very serious health risks, not the least of which was lowering testosterone in males and women, thyroid dysfunction, bone disease, and then, of course, reduced IQ in children. So a 2024 court ruling backed his concern, citing a federal review found higher levels of fluoride were definitely tied to lower IQ scores in children. So with fluoride now in everything from tap water to toothpaste, Kennedy says it's time for a national rethink. Now, I make sure that the deodorant that I use doesn't have fluoride in it, doesn't have aluminum in it, and I make sure that the water that I drink doesn't have fluoride as much as possible, as I said. But I certainly make sure that my toothpaste doesn't have fluoride. Now, I went in for a dental cleaning and exam here, last September, so I'm due for another one. And they found 4 cavities in my mouth. Itty bitty, tiny little ones that didn't even need a filling. They just burned them out with a laser. And then they, of course, the standard thing is watch the sugar intake. The sugar isn't what causes cavities. It's malnutrition, missing certain things in your diet that's absolutely necessary for good enamel in your teeth. Cysteine and lysine, 2 very important amino acids. And if you overcook your meat, you destroy those amino acids. That's one thing that leads to that malnutrition. But I'll get to more of that later. But I think it's incredibly important for Kennedy to be here and doing the kinds of things that he is doing. So I want to move on here. I want to, as soon as we get back, let's see, do I want to, I want to talk about these sugar substitutes. This is it's an article that was in Fox News a week ago that I thought was really interesting that I want to share. Because, you can't escape it anymore, because people think that if they have these 0 calorie sweeteners, Equal, Splenda, the pink one, I forget what it is, but it's aspartame, that somehow they're doing themselves a favor by not, dumping this raw sugar into the system. And so likewise, continued use of that would somehow be beneficial. Welcome back to the K-Talk audience. It sounds like the news has let up, and I'll try not to talk over anything that might follow here. Well, let me just, I started talking here about sucralose during the break. And it may be one of the most widely used sugar substitutes because, it has an aftertaste, but it's not as bad as aspartame. And what they know now is that you have this gland in your brain called the hypothalamus. It's called the hypothalamus because it's sitting underneath the thalamus. Hypo meaning under. Hypodermic, dermic meaning skin, hypo under. A hypodermic injection is an injection under the skin. Hypothalamus is a gland that's sitting underneath the thalamus. And instead of giving it its own unique name, they found it under the thalamus, so they called it the hypothalamus. It's also one of the parts of our ageless thyroid supplement that Mary and I created. My goodness, it's at least 10 years ago now. And a lot of study went into that because of the value and the importance of a healthy hypothalamus, because it has an awful lot to do with regulating your appetite and regulating your body weight. And it also has some direct effect on the amygdala and the basal ganglia that has an awful lot to do to affect fear and rage. So the sucralose has a direct effect on the hypothalamus. So this study was done at this, USC's, University of Southern California's Keck School of Medicine. And Dr. Katie Page, who's director of the University of Southern California's Diabetes and Obesity Research Institute and co-author of the study, said this: particularly in individuals with obesity, sucralose causes a significant activation of that brain area, the hypothalamus, and it was linked to greater ratings of hunger. Now, I think a lot of people use these sugar substitutes out of habit because they know the sugar is bad, refined sugar is bad. There's a big difference between having a cup of tea or coffee with a couple of tablespoons of honey in it as opposed to a couple of tablespoons of table sugar. And then the idea that you use one packet of these sugar alternatives, somehow you're better off than if you had the actual honey, which is far better than the table sugar, to sweeten your hot drink or cold, whatever. And what she says, what they found is that in people who are obese already have a hypothalamic reaction in the body because it's somehow the metabolic disease has gotten to the point where the hypothalamus has lost control of body weight. And it just dawned on me. I just realized something here talking about this with a patient of mine. I can't wait to tell him. Anyway, Paige, who's an endocrinologist, said there have been plenty of discrepancies when it comes to non-caloric sweeteners and whether they're harmful or helpful for weight loss. And so we just automatically buy into the propaganda, as we buy into the propaganda of the news, in the evening news. We're propagandized about Ukraine. We're propagandized about Gaza. We're propagandized about the conservative aspects of government by the neoliberal left. We're propagandized by the conservatives in Congress about the neoliberal left. And we're propagandized by the FDA regarding food and drug suggestions. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. One of my colleagues a chiropractor in the Valley that I've known for many years, came in yesterday with, and he's as habitually a user of standard process products as I am. And he came in with his wife. Now, of course, I'm not going to mention any names. And because she's considering ablation in the heart. Ablation is where they, whether it's uterine ablation or cardiac ablation, they burn nerve endings to stop the nerve signal to that particular part of the organ. A lot of ladies who have just heavy menstrual bleeding, rather than opt for a hysterectomy, may do uterine ablation, where they just burn the inner wall of the uterus so that it can no longer form the endometrium, which is what's sloughed off every month in their periods. So it doesn't make an endometrium anymore. I don't know what that would feel like to have that done. I wouldn't want it done. But you do the same thing with the heart. So it's often used for in treating arrhythmias. It's also used for treating high blood pressure, so that in order for the heart not to beat as hard, they'll burn part of the heart muscle so it doesn't beat as hard. Now, I don't have to tell you to sit back and think about that for a second, but you already have, how much sense that makes. But it's one of the techniques in cardiology today. So he wanted his wife to have the heart sound recorder to see her heart's function. So Trudy did the test, and once the test was done, I came in and sat down, and it's always nice how Trudy always shuts up and turns and looks at me for me to talk when she's perfectly capable of communicating with the patient, but they want to hear it from me. So, all right. So I sit there, and I probably repeated what she had already said, but we examined the mitral and the tricuspid and the aortic and the pulmonic valves that this test does. And it was horrible. I mean, it was really bad. I said to her, I said, do you want me to sugarcoat this, or you want me to tell you the truth? Because I can sugarcoat this and tell you, it's not that bad. Or I can tell you the truth, and the truth is I would love to buy a life insurance policy on you, right here and now, because this is terrible. And on one of the valves, it was just constant. There was no interruption to the beat. And one of the more important ones, the mitral, was so weak you could hardly tell where the lub dub was. So her husband, a longtime chiropractor, longtime user of standard process, showed me the list of stuff that he's taking. And we did a test on him. And we're of the same age. She's a few years older, but he and I are of the same age. And his scan looked amazingly good for somebody in their mid-70s. And I told him, I said, if I hadn't known that you had been using heart support from standard process, I would have known you did anyway just by looking at the scan, or you were an avid eater of liver. Because as people have asked me several times, do I have to take all these pills? No, just eat better. Stop eating crap and start eating food, and you don't have to take these pills. But if you're going to continue to eat fast foods, processed foods, ultra-processed foods that have no nutrition in them, then yeah, you've got to take these pills, or you're going to die an ugly death. I mean, there was a time when I was really nice about this. There was a time when I would be kind and gentle and tender and just pat him on the back and say, well, let's do some little baby steps, and, no, you want to live, you have to eat food. And you're not eating food. I know you're not eating food, even though your belly's full, because this test right here tells me your heart is falling to pieces. So Trudy had her chew up, they're not the tastiest things in the world, chew up a few of the supplements that make up the heart support. And it's one of the Jack's packs. In fact, my good friend Steve was in there yesterday, and he saw it, and he picked it up. He because of the discount on the price. He picked up Jack's pack for the heart. So Trudy had her chew up a few of these supplements and then give her some water and create a little slurry, a little mud, to sit underneath the tongue for about a minute, and then swallow it. And then retested her in 20 minutes. Immediate change in that scan. I feel bad about not having brought the pre and the post scan in here today, so I could at least show the streamers the immediate change that took place in her heart function. She saw it, and her eyes opened up, and she went and got the support. I said the only bad side effect of this is you're going to live longer. No organ in the body responds as fast to good nutrition as the heart does, just as no organ falls apart faster than the heart does to malnutrition, which I believe is the reason why it's the number one cause of death. So she was on a multitude of heart medication. Does this mean she stops doing that? No. You keep taking that medication. What I'm giving you is food. I'm not giving you meds. I'm just giving you food specific for the heart. All right. I kind of got off track there for a minute, but I wanted to talk about that because I want to talk about some other Jack's packs here in a minute that are starting to get some notoriety. But when you take something like these sugar, calorie sweetener or alternatives, they found out that it increases hunger and activity in the hypothalamus, especially that are obese, and it changes how the hypothalamus communicates with other parts of the brain. And unlike sugar, sucralose does not increase blood levels of certain hormones that create that feeling of fullness. Sugar will do that. Sugar, a lot of the reasons that some of our overweight, obese people will, and I'm overweight, so I know this by personal experience. Sugar will will release dopamine. And that's why when you're feeling a little depressed or a little separated, a little alone, and you eat something sweet, cookies, whatever, ice cream, whatever else, candy, you're going to get a dopamine release. You're going to get this feel good come over you. For a lot of people, I think it's just basically a subconscious kind of thing, but it temporarily satisfies them. They found out that the sucralose does not do that. It does not release these hormones. And so even though it was a short-term study that was done here, she said, I don't recommend substituting non-caloric sweeteners for added sugars, pointing out that the study of these sugar substitutes may lead to greater cravings overall. That was one of the conclusions of the study. Now, it was a small study, and it was short-term. However, that was one of the major conclusions. It could lead to greater cravings. So she suggested that more Americans should try to wean themselves off of these sweeteners and stick to eating sugar that is found naturally in fruits and vegetables. And Kelly, if by any chance you're listening to this show this morning, I was wrong in what I told you yesterday, because you said you were trying to get off of carbohydrates, but you eat 2 apples a day. And I kind of jumped on you about that. And you eat Fujis that aren't real apples. You know, they're like these high sugar content apples that hybridization has made. Man made a Fuji. Mother Nature didn't. And you know what my favorite apple is? A Fuji. A Fuji. This is about 2 or 3 degrees above freezing, sliced up with sea salt. That would be dessert for me for any day, for any meal. But they're high in sugar, and so I told you, because you were concerned about fatty liver disease that your doctor thinks that you have, And the problem with fatty liver disease is you get these deposits of fat inside the liver, and the liver has a very tough outer covering, just like the heart does, just like the stomach does. And any extra tissue buildup inside that organ is not going to make the organ swell, although livers can certainly swell. Sorry, I heard something. I heard something come over K-Talk. So, and so what it does is it squashes the internal part of the liver to where the liver can't properly function. And when the liver can't properly function, you're going to die. You can't live without it. So keeping that in mind, you need to understand this. Your body can't use fructose. Fructose is fruit sugar. Your body can't use it. Your body has to convert fructose to glucose. This is something that takes place in the liver. It can, to some degree, in the cells, but in the liver does so many functions. I think they've identified like some 600 things your liver does. But one of the things is to convert the fructose to glucose. And so when you eat a lot of fruit, you get a lot of fructose. If you drink drinks that have high fructose syrup in them, or you have condiments that have high fructose syrup, you're getting an overly processed form of fructose that can really hurt the liver. And so I told him, well, the apples, the fructose in the apple, you're just feeding your problem. And he got all heartbroken that he couldn't eat his apples. I didn't say you can't eat them. I just want you to be aware it's contributing to the problem. So who, of all people, of course, Trudy, our nutritionist, pulled me off to the side and said, the high pectin, the high fiber content of an apple negates worrying about apples being eaten by people with fatty liver disease. Well, just where did you get that? So she showed me the study through the National Institutes of Health. Apples are not to be worried about in connection to fatty liver disease. So I was going to call him, and then I got distracted. I think I'll call him and get to the office. Kelly, if you're not listening now, I was wrong. Have your apples. I would just prefer you ate the apples that Mother Nature made. That are still good. They're just not as artificially sweet. Well, it's not artificial. It's true sugar that we've created. Galas we made. Fuji's we made. There's a couple of others that people choose them because they're loaded with sugar. All right. So, Splenda, I was talking about sucralose. Splenda responded when they were confronted by the study. The study went out to these artificial sugar people. And Splenda responded and said, yeah, we see the study. It's published in Nature, Nature Metabolism. There were 75 people in the study. We feel the study was too small, several limitations. Sample size, self-reported data. A lot of times when studies like this are done, you have either a food diary or some kind of a diary that you keep. So it's not, it's not randomized, it's not controlled. You just send in the information in regard to certain questions as a participant in the study. So the statement said this: a wealth of trusted scientific research has consistently confirmed that sucralose does not affect blood glucose or insulin levels and is safe for regular consumption. That came from the Splenda people. Also, numerous studies have found no link between the consumption of sweet-tasting foods or beverages and a long-term preference for sweetness. Now, the Daily Mail out of England said this: in their study published in the journal Nature Metabolism, scientists tested how 75 participants Each responded to 3 drinks taken on separate occasions. One liquid was just plain water, the other was laced with artificial sweetener sucralose, and the last one contained sugar. Every participant had MRI scans taken of their brains, gave blood samples, and filled out a hunger survey before and after each drink. The scans revealed that participants had increased activity in the part of the brain called the hypothalamus after consuming the sucralose solutions. This is the part of the organ that governs background processes in the body, such as temperature, tiredness, and critically hunger levels. Scans also showed sucralose led to increased connection between the hypothalamus and other parts of the brain involved with motivation and decision making. These effects were particularly pronounced in obese people. Dr. Page said that this suggested the sweetener could induce cravings and eating behaviors. Blood tests results showed another way sucralose may influence food cravings. When participants drank the real sugar solution, scientists observed the body produced hormones linked to a reduction in appetite. However, these hormones were absent when participants drank sucralose. In other words, when you have something from Mother Nature, even though the sugary material in some of these drinks is just overly processed sugars, it still releases a certain hormone, dopamine, that gives you a satisfaction feeling. They could not find that with sucralose. Sucralose did not have that effect, and the differences in hormone responses to sucralose compared to sugar were even more pronounced with participants who were obese. The 75 participants were split almost equally in terms of sex, with an even mix of healthy, overweight, and obese people. Dr. Page said one finding that needed further exploration was that women seemed to have greater brain changes after consuming sucralose. The team are now planning to follow-up study on exploring the impact of calorie-free sweeteners like sucralose on children. Sucralose was discovered accidentally by a British scientist during routine experiments in the 70s. It is about 600 times sweeter than sugar, but contains virtually no calories. Now, the reason it doesn't have calories, it does have calories, it's just that it's not processed by the body. The body doesn't recognize it as a food, and it just goes right on through the system. It comes out in the form it went in, through the urine. While this study has suggested a link between calorie-free sweeteners and increased appetite and obesity, others have found the opposite. However, other studies have suggested sucralose increases levels of a protein called GLUT4 that promotes the accumulation of fat in our cells, changes associated with an increased risk of obesity. Sugar substitutes are accepted by experts as an alternative to sugar that comes without the same risk of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and strokes, alongside weight gain and tooth decay. So, what's the bottom line here? Because they immediately came out and say, well, that doesn't mean you just start taking all this extra sugar. What they are not saying, because the study isn't expansive enough to say this, but you might be better off using the sugar than the substitute. You pick up more calories, and it depends on how much sugar. I mean, how much, you look at a can of a cola drink. I'm not going to there's several cola drinks out there. The average is anywhere from 8 to 12 teaspoons of sugar per can. Now, if you put sugar in your coffee or your tea, how many do you put in? 12 teaspoons of sugar in your coffee or your tea? Of course not. Unless you got some serious problems. But usually all you have to do is with one of these sugar substitutes is put in 1 packet or even half a packet, if you can get used to the aftertaste. But what they're saying is sucralose increased hunger and activity in the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus communicates with other parts of the brain. And the hypothalamus sits at the top of your HPA axis. The hypothalamus, the pituitary, the thyroid, the adrenals. These are all organs that are fed and nurtured by our product, Ageless Thyroid. That, as I said, Mary and I created this product 10 years ago. And it's people, every day, people are buying it, either online or over the counter. Because it's helped. It helps with the autonomic balance in the body. It helps with the ability to handle stress. It helps with the ability to keep an even keel emotionally in your life. And the hypothalamus is sitting there at the top of this whole thing. And it's the same thing that came out in this study. These the sucralose, actually affects the function of the hypothalamus that communicates with other parts of the brain, but it also communicates, well, the other parts, the pituitary, the pituitary gland, but it also communicates with the thyroid and the adrenals. And then there's feedback that goes back and forth between these organs as well as other parts of the brain. So you have this very sophisticated central nervous system that is definitely affected by the food you eat, just as in the example I gave earlier of this 78-year-old lady who saw immediate changes in the heart sound recorder, by just chewing up, 5, 6 little pills that are not medication, they're food concentrates that have vitamins in them and other things plus glandulars. There is heart extract in these things. And within about 20 minutes, a complete, you would not know unless you knew ahead of time what was going on, that these two scans were the same person. They were that different. And it got her attention. And the husband that was there has been using this stuff for a long time, and his scan looked good for his age. So I'm bringing this up. As I said to her, I said, what's the number one cause of death? And heart disease. And I said, who stands as the vanguards of heart disease in this country? And I have to come up with a different question because nobody ever has the answer to that question that I want them to have. So I'm asking the wrong question. Who are the guardians at the gate? Who are the vanguards of heart disease? Well, cardiologists. That's the answer. I'm just not asking the right question. And so I said, you are getting information from a branch of medicine that has the highest death rate in this country. And then I said what I say to everybody when that subject comes up. Think about that. Just think about that for a moment. Think about the advice that they're giving you. And then, of course, the normal fallback, retrench position on that is, well, think how bad it would be if they weren't there giving these drugs. So I said, how long you been on these drugs? Quite some time, actually. Look at your scan. Look at your scan on food. Look at your scan on drugs. Look at your scan on food. Do I stop the drugs? Of course not. That's between you and your cardiologist. You might want to rethink getting an ablation, but that's between you and your cardiologist and your husband here. I don't answer questions like that. That's not my purview. My purview is this second scan after you took those supplements. Look what happened to your heart. That's where I live. So it's one of our 5 Jack's packs. I have, for those who are on the stream, I have just tons of information on these Jack packs. You can, these are available at the office. In the digestive one, there's one, handling fat. There's 4 products. One for handling fats, one for rebuilding the microbiome in the gut, one for building tremendous enzymes in the system, and one for digesting proteins. Those 4 things will absolutely change your digestive experience. Not just in the sense that you can have a lot less problems digesting foods, but the greater energy that will be yours because you're digesting food instead of a lot of the stuff passing through only to be bulked up in a constipated bowel. The heart support, there's just 3 products, and these are the 3 things we gave that lady. One to stop inflammation of the heart, the other one to make sure that the chemical energy coming from her food is converted to strong electrical energy to the heart muscle. And then the other one is simply food for the heart. Just 3 products. She chewed them up, waited 20 minutes, retested, and I guarantee anybody who does this is going to see an immediate change within 20 minutes. What does that mean? It means that her heart can rebuild itself because it's not going to happen on drugs. I showed her what her scan looked like because of the drugs. That doesn't mean the drugs aren't doing something. Yeah, the drugs are bringing down blood pressure. The drugs are stimulating the heart to do its job. But it's like beating a dead horse. You want that horse to get back up on its feet and get back in the race. Not just lay there out of breath in the dust and the sun. And that's where a lot of people's hearts are. So I have been to 2 viewings in the last month of dear friends who died way too young. And then my mentor, the man who's taught me more about what I do than any other man, 5 years younger than I am, died of a massive heart attack last November. And and we talked about this. He knew he had a few heart issues. I said, get up to my clinic. You can certainly afford a weekend with me in Salt Lake while we go through and do a heart study and then show you what you need to do. Never got around to it. But the heart pack, just three products will absolutely change how your heart works. So you don't feel lightheaded when you stand up. You don't feel a little chest pain walking across the room. You don't feel lightheaded up and down the stairs or have to stop halfway up the stairs to catch your breath. You can actually walk around the grocery store with your mate when you are shopping for food. You can actually get back out in the garden again and start tilling the soil for this spring planting. You can actually go camping back up in the mountains again when it warms up a bit more. Then there's the immune pack. There's just 4 products. It's the old 636 formula that so many families that I take care of use on a regular basis. So they go through the entire winter without a cold or without the flu. And then just one more thing's added to it, Imuplex. Because Imuplex has, I think, 7 different protomorphogens in it that trigger different parts of the immune system to develop better resistance to disease. And that's it, just Jack's Pack. They're all a month's supply. And they're all on discounted prices. Then there's the one here on the female endocrine system. 4 products. The ageless thyroid that I talked about earlier that covers the hypothalamus that I've just been talking about with sucralose, the pituitary, the thyroid, and the adrenal glands. It's food for these glands so they work better, just like the change in the heart sound recorder for this lady's heart. After a few minutes of waiting, after having that stuff absorbed sublingually into the bloodstream under her tongue, within 20 minutes, a massive change in her heart scan. And then it also includes strength for the liver, strength for the ovary, and strength for the sex hormones. 4 different products. And then the foundation pack. Gee, Dr. Jack, I'm not having any of those problems. I guess I don't need it. No, you need the foundation pack. This is something I take every morning. And again, it's got ageless thyroid in it. And it has Catalin. And Steve, I remember seeing you yesterday in the clinic, getting a large bottle of Catalin. Trace minerals and the essential fatty acids. It isn't that hard. It isn't that hard because I think before the spring is over with, there's going to be somebody else I know dropping dead of a heart attack before their time with no preliminary indications. I mean, I want to be positive about this whole thing, but I'm also a realist. I recently saw a 16-year-old boy's heart scan, and it was scary. I told these people that were in the clinic yesterday, the worst heart scans are triathletes and marathon runners have the worst heart scans of all. You think it would be the opposite No, they're beating their hearts to pieces. Well, they eat salads. Yeah. They usually have good diets, and I think that's probably why they're still alive. And not being a marathoner, certainly not being a triathlete, it may sound counterintuitive for me to question or criticize somebody who does those things, but it's based on tests, the tests that we do on our patients, and it shows a very weak heart. And why does it keep beating, and why do they keep running? Because of the momentum and the hormonal stuff and the good food that they're still eating keeps them going until it doesn't. And that's the interesting thing about death. Life is life until it isn't. And sometimes we have fair warning. We come down with a heart attack or a stroke or some organ dysfunction, the pancreas, the ovaries, the thyroid, something just stops working because it's out of nutrition. It has been run to the horse falling into the sun and the dust, and it doesn't want to get up anymore. But it worked fine up to that point. Well, we can get it back out of the dust and get it back on its feet. But you have to feed it specific foods. The kind of foods our ancestors ate. When there was no cancer, there was no heart disease to speak of. There was no arthritis. There was no diabetes. Those things only showed up when we stopped eating the foods Mother Nature made and started showing up with grocery food. And then things went downhill. And that happens around the world all the time. When you find various cultures that are isolated from commercial foods, that are eating the foods of their ancestry, and they're healthy. They don't have heart disease. They're not dropping dead from heart attacks. They don't have cancer. They're very healthy people. All right, now, one other thing I want to talk about before I get into the next subject. I wanted to get into the power of light. I think this is from Mercola. I thought it was very fascinating because it fits right in with, of course, it fits right in with my understanding of light. But I wanted to mention this fellow who, I don't want to say too much about him. I'll just say that he's the center for a college basketball team on the top level of NCAA competition. You know, just like BYU or Utah State. Top level competition. And I have this video of him being knocked down and the other center for the other team landing right on his head and smashing it into the floor. They both fell down at the same time. And it knocked my patient out for several minutes. I think I've mentioned him briefly before. I'm presenting a paper on him in about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, down in San Diego at a conference to about 150 doctors. And his aunt is a patient. She went and got him in another state and brought him straight to the office. Now, he'd already been through CAT scans and MRIs looking for brain bleeds, looking for evidence of serious concussion. And he had a serious concussion, but fortunately, no brain bleed. And but he was taken off the floor, couldn't play. And when he was brought in, it was robotic. It was kind of automatic, very listless, not very conversant. But at least he was back on his feet, and he was not allowed to play basketball again until he could pass a post-concussive test, which is really pretty simple. But looking at him as I did when he came in the office, he wasn't going to pass any test. He couldn't pass a driving test, let alone a concussion test. So I got a history from him, and he showed me the videos, and oh my goodness, how did that not break your neck? And I got some x-rays, because there's no way in the world I would know what to possibly do for him without film, which is the same with any patient. I have no idea what to do for you without x-rays, because what I'm trying to fix, you cannot feel. You can only see it on a film. So I worked on him, and I only had to work once, and he's now headed to the Japanese leagues for professional basketball. But right after I had worked on him, his eyes opened up. He got very conversant. He grew an inch in height, not because he grew, he just stood up straighter. He came in at 6'9" and left at 6'10" in his height, because we measured him. And he could feel it. He felt taller. I said, how can, when you're that tall and you got a duct to go through my doorway, how can you feel taller? And it's the same thing most people feel when I work on them. They feel their shoulders level, they feel their hips level off, they feel the change in their legs, they feel their spine straighten up. Because that's all controlled right there at the base of the skull. Your posture is controlled right there at the base of the skull. So another fellow who is, wait for this, wonder why they play station ID 13 minutes before the hour. I'm sure there's a reason. A 78-year-old fellow, I just saw him yesterday, came in with low back pain, mid-back pain, and pain in his right leg. I never touched his mid-back. I never touched his lower back. I never touched his right leg. I only touched at the very top of the neck based on x-ray analysis yesterday. I didn't need to work on him. He is feeling so much better. 17-year-old girl, just killer headaches. Very tight neck, very tight shoulders. I worked on her twice. They're all gone. Her mother, headaches, tight neck, shoulders as well. She took me a little longer, but everything's gone. And I don't need, this idea of seeing a chiropractor once a week the rest of your life, I don't know where that nonsense, where that comes from. Would you see a dentist once a week for the rest of your life? 46-year-old sciatica and feels crooked. First correction, sciatica was gone. Another one, his wife, headaches, she felt twisted. By the second time I saw her, headaches are all gone. 77-year-old woman, migraines for several years, has been to all the MDs, ENTs, brought in her MRI report that showed that there wasn't anything wrong with her brain and nothing wrong with her neck except what MRI reports normally show of a 77-year-old woman. Osteoporosis, arthritis, degenerative disc disease, none of which caused her migraines. After her first correction, the migraines are gone. A 22-year-old from up north with migraines. Very tall, very hunched over. After the first correction, incredible reduction in migraine pain. 48-year-old, chronic migraines since a little girl. Lower back pain, has had 16 surgeries, history of epilepsy. All of that gone. 49-year-old woman, vertigo, really bad prior to the month. Been taking medication for vertigo. Medication wasn't helping. Has been bad since August of last year with very little relief. Some relief from the Epley maneuver. Those of you who have vertigo and the Epley maneuver, it's just to get the crystals balanced back in your semicircular canals. She would get some relief from that. After the second correction, no more vertigo. I saw her, I think, for the fourth or fifth time here the other day. Just no vertigo at all. And then a little girl who's 12 with epilepsy and seizures. These are people I've just seen recently. I could go back the first of the month and talk to you for 2 hours on who I've seen. And this little girl, 12 years old, has been going through various medical therapies and medical investigation to see what they can do about her seizures and her epilepsy. And so I know her father. Her father brought her in. I took some pictures and had an unusually bad misalignment for a 12-year-old girl. I mean, kind of misalignment I see in someone who's played high school football for 4 years. But I would not have seen it without seeing it on an x-ray. Since they've been bringing her in, and I was seeing her once a week for about 4 or 5 weeks, no seizures, no epilepsy, they all stopped. And now I'm probably going to see her every 2 weeks for 2 or 3 visits. And since she started this recent treatment, no epilepsy, no seizures. We're kind of running out of time. I wanted to talk about some other stuff, but I just wanted you to know I put these Jack packs together because people will come in, well, what do I do about my immune system? What do I do about my wife's sex drive? What do I do about this cough I can't get rid of? That's why we put these things together. Now, I would suggest that every household have at least one immune Jack's pack, just sitting there waiting to be used. This lady that I know of in my neighborhood had very, very serious chest congestion. She just could not throw off the cough and the choking, and the coughing would lead to choking. The coughing was so bad. And I talked to her. I have something for this. Nah, you chiropractor. I said, I've got something. I'm telling you, it's a miracle. I've got something for this if you'll try. Well, after she had so thoroughly poisoned her liver on every possible antibiotic that she could get, she finally said, all right, what is this stuff? And I said, why don't you try it, and then I'll tell you what it is. Well, what's in it? Why don't you just try it, and then I'll tell you what's in it. I mean, I'm just perturbed with her bias. And I gave her, I don't know, 12, 16 of these capsules in a little baggie. And I said, if you trust me at all, I want you to take 2 of these every 3 hours. And I'll talk to you tomorrow. Talked to her the next day. She said, what is that stuff? I want it. Why, what happened? It's gone. I'm not coughing. I'm not choking. So it's Conjuplex. Just one of the flagship products of Standard Process, Conjuplex. It's one of the absolute miracle products that they produce. And what's it do? It completely reverses the upper respiratory problems, just like that. So she ordered a bottle. She said, I probably should have this on hand. Yeah, if you go through this, on a regular basis, which is based on your dietary choices, believe me, yeah, you ought to have a bottle of this sitting around so the next time. So she ordered a bottle and I got it for her. Just Conjuplex. That's in the immune pack. I think. It should be in the immune pack. No, it's not. But what's in Conjuplex is in the immune pack, not as Conjuplex. No, the immune pack is strong enough by itself. If you throw all those things together, you're going to end up with Conjuplex. All right, we got a few minutes left. My consultations are free. They can be scheduled online at forbiddendoctor.com. You can also call the office, 801-523-1890, for more information on Jack's Packs, for more information on what we do structurally. And my excitement right now is putting my presentation together that I'll be giving to 150 doctors in San Diego at the beginning of next month on 2 concussion patients that I have. And both of them doing extremely well. And especially the college basketball center, because he's going to be playing now, he's free to go, playing in the Japanese league. And I said, Japanese have a basketball league? And I said, I know the Chinese do, because China's big enough. They've got, there's a element of their population that regularly produces 7-foot-tall men. And they said, no, the American form of basketball is just crazy in Japan right now. And I said, well, what about this, Europe? You got Spanish leagues, you've got the French, German, and they don't pay as well. Don't pay as well. I heard they pay as good as the NBA. Nope, they don't. The Japanese pay even more because it's really catching on there. Just like baseball did. once American baseball was introduced in Japan. Now they get just, and look at the Japanese baseball players that come over here and play in our leagues, especially in the recent World Series last fall. All right, I'm rambling. I know that. What else here that I want to get across to you? I've said many times you would do well to have this immune pack in your house, because the next time somebody cold, flu, upper respiratory, sinus problems, infections, all these kinds of things, here's what you want that has absolutely no side effects. And I know it's real easy to run off to Walgreens or CVS or some of these other drugstores and get the chemical stuff that will stop the symptoms. You don't want to stop the symptoms. The symptoms are your body's efforts to clean itself out from whatever's bothering it. You just want to make it easier for the body to do that and get it over quick, like 24 to 48 hours rather than 2 weeks. That's what usually happens when you use these things. But anyway, we're coming up towards the end, and I am going to be doing things this weekend to set up a better studio to where I can start doing smaller segments for the stream, both political and health-wise, and to create a backlog and a real battery and a real library of information that I think will help people live better naturally rather than trying to live better chemically, which is what the propaganda out there is all about. It's how to live better chemically. I'm off to the office here very shortly, plenty of patients to see today. I don't take this privilege lightly, and I see this as a privilege, especially with the K-Talk audience, to be able to be a regular part of this for, I've 30 years now. Now I'm in my 31st year as of a week ago. Last week was my 30th year at K-Talk. How that ever happened. Boy, just sometimes how a series of events can come together and just change your life. So I appreciate being a part of this. We're going to go to the news here in a second on K-Talk, and then I'll finish with a couple of comments to those who are on the stream. And that'll have to do until next week. So, as I bring up the radio station here in front of me, Zoom is not responding, but it looks like I'm still on the... See y'all later. All right. That will take care of that. And for those of you who are on the stream, I appreciate... Oh, we got higher numbers. Great. Totally love this, packed full of info, love the information. Okay. Thank you so much for your comments. I'll be back Monday with my political stuff. And I know I keep baiting you, telling you that I'm, moving closer and closer to having smaller packets of info on different subjects instead of trying to cram everything into one show. This is kind of the momentum of what I've been doing, but the momentum is slowing down so I can move to something much more practical. And so I'm just a stream. I cut off the radio part. So those of you who are still out there, I love you. I appreciate you. If you can share this, refer it, send it to other people so that we can build the audience, it'll help me out. So until I see you again, I'm just going to bid you a fond adieu here at Breaking Health Barriers. I'm Dr. Jack Stockwell. Be good out there. Be good to